my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and tonight I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. I picked this up because I'd heard a few people talking about it, and it sounded really fun, really light, a little silly. And that was exactly what I was looking for before we jump head first into spooky season here, where we'll be reading lots of thrillers, lots of horror, heavier topics. I thought the cover was cute, and it sounded like a fun time, and boy was it. So how these book talks go is I'll give you the basic premise, some of my basic thoughts, and then I'll get a bit more into the spoilers. But before I do, I'll give you a warning so you can get on out of here if you want. But let's just get on into it. So The Husbands is about a woman named Lauren who comes home one night from a night out with her friends, and she finds her husband Michael waiting at home. The only problem here is Lauren's not married, and she does not know who this man in her house is. She understandably gets very upset. She's like, if you leave now, I won't call the police. Although in her mind, she's like, I'm still going to call the police. But she's trying to do anything to get him out of her house. And he, knowing himself to be her husband, is understandably very alarmed by this reaction that she's having. And he's like, are you okay? Let me get you a glass of ice water. You sit down, take a deep breath. And she's like, oh. But then she's kind of like, okay, well, I better rein it in case this man's dangerous. I don't want to upset him. So once she has a minute to herself, she's looking through her phone, and at first, so she pulls her phone out of her purse to phone the police, and she sees there's a picture of the two of them, and she's like, what does this mean? She gets into her phone, she's scrolling through her camera roll, she sees many pictures of them together, and she's wondering, what is going on, as are we. Basically, from there, after, I think it's the next day, he goes up into the attic to change a light bulb. The thing is, though, when he comes back down, he's a different man, a different husband. And her whole life around her shifts to accommodate this new husband. Like, the photos on her phone are of her and this new husband. And, the people in her life know this new husband. The decor of her house is different with this new husband. And she's like, what is going on? So she starts to realize that every time a husband goes up into the attic, a new one comes down. And this begins a sort of hunt, for the perfect husband. Anytime she gets one, some are nice and some are not, and some are funny and some are boring, and some are handsome, and some just aren't her type. So whenever one comes down, sometimes she lets him stay for a few days, a few weeks to figure out if this is her husband. Sometimes she sees him before he's even down the stairs. She's like, oh, you forgot something. And up he goes. And we get a ton of husbands. A ton of husbands. As I started reading it, I was like, is this going to really quickly get very repetitive? But for me, it doesn't. I love these kinds of stories. Like, if you've read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, or If Only by Melanie Murphy, or if you've seen the movie About Time, I love all of those. I love the concept of the what ifs, seeing how things change when something changes, the futile act of trying to make something perfect, although it never will be, And if you like that, I would definitely recommend this, 100%. This is 5 stars for me. I loved it. I don't know that everyone will. Like, if those kind of stories aren't for you, you pass. Give it a pass. But it's clever. It's laugh out loud funny in some parts. Like, there's one part toward the end that gets so silly. I was laughing out loud sitting on the couch. And there are many parts that are they're just funny. And if you are in the mood for something light and you like that sort of what if, other world thing, give it a check it out. It's out now. It came out this year, I think in March or April, and it's so good. It's just fun, and I really loved it. I thought it was great. Anyway, now would be the time to get on out of here, so I can tell you a little bit about what goes on, how she keeps it from getting repetitive, if you will. So if you've already read the book and you want someone to talk to about it, that's me. I'm your girl. If you don't plan on reading it and you just want to hear about how it goes, let's get on into it. So husbands, we're going through so many husbands. I think at this point we're at 100 plus husbands. She starts to notice though that some things, of course, if you change something, other things are going to change. Sometimes in different timelines with different husbands, she's got a different job, or, and some she's incredibly rich. But things get a little sticky when in one she notices that her sister, who is happily married and has kids, doesn't have that wife or those kids. And she's like, oh no matter what, no matter if I like this husband or not, he's got to go back up those stairs because I cannot ruin my sister's life like this. There's one husband, he's American, she really likes him, and without her realizing it, he accidentally, without her knowing, he goes up into the attic, and she had really liked him. She was thinking this might be the one. He was so handsome and charismatic. And then he goes into the attic and she's like, oh no. Anyway, eventually one guy comes down from the attic. His name is, let me see. I think it's Bohai or Bohai. I think it's Bohai. I Googled how to pronounce it, so I think it's Bohai. He comes down. They're watching TV. All of a sudden, he's like, oh, I heard something in the attic. And she's like, you did? And he's like, yep, I'll be right back. So he's pulling down the attic stairs, heading up, and all of a sudden, she realizes that he's like her. But instead of being her, he's one of the husbands, but he also has this, instead of being the one waiting for a new husband to come, he's one of the husbands that leaves, but he's aware. She's like, wait a minute, I've been on the receiving end, or on the other side of this conversation. You're leaving, you're not coming back down. And he's like, maybe. And so they get to talking, and they're both so relieved to have met somebody going through the same thing. Because at first she's like, wait a minute, do all the husbands know this? And they're just pretending. And he's like, no, I don't think so. I think it's just us. So for him, how it works is it's not always an attic. Sometimes it's a shed or a wardrobe or a closet. But he can go, and then he ends up, so she stays in her house every time it's the husband's coming to her. But for him, he gets in the whatever, and then he comes back out and he's somewhere new with a new wife or husband. Sometimes it's a husband, sometimes it's a wife. And she's like, so they decide to spend a few months together just to get a break, honestly, from the husbands of it all. And they just spend time together and are so happy to be able to talk freely about it with someone. Because before him, she'd try to Google it. But obviously, if you Google husbands disappearing in attic, new husband coming down the stairs, you're not going to find any Google hits. Well, you would now in our universe. Probably be a hit to this book. But, yeah, so they're just happy to have each other, and they become really, really, really good friends. And because at first she's like, okay, when it's finally time for you to go, what if we don't remember each other? But he's like, no, I think we will, because every time they go into a new situation, a new husband, a new wife, a new world, they have the memories from before. But nobody else in their life does. Like her sister, her friends, they all know these husbands, but they don't have no memory of them, of course, because each time a new husband comes, these people have the memories of this husband, if that makes sense. I know this is a lot. So anyway, he goes, and they do remember each other. So from there, she's like, okay, time to get this husband business on the road. So a few times, husbands start repeating. 3 times, I think, over the course of the book, her ex-boyfriend is her husband, and she's like, absolutely not. why does this keep happening? Eventually, she goes to America to try to find that one man she really liked who went up into the attic by accident. His name is Carter from Colorado. And she finds him all right, and he thinks she's a stalker, which she is. But he calls her out on it. And it's a whole thing. She's like, okay, that's not him. Because that's the thing. These men, once they go back up to the attic and disappear out of her house, they still exist in the world. She's able to, like, find them. Back she goes to London, because I don't know if I mentioned that, but this takes place in the UK. So, back to the attic. The husband's coming. Eventually, one comes down. His name is Zac Efron. Spelt differently. When he's coming out of the attic for the first time, he actually falls out of the attic and breaks his back. She's like, oh, no. He goes to the hospital, which is where she finds out his name is Zac Efron from his ID. And she's like, oh, shit. So as she's getting to know him, she notices that everybody in her life and everybody in his life is obsessed with him. They love him. They think he's the greatest thing. But unfortunately, she finds him incredibly boring. And she's like, okay, this man has a broken back. He's going to be in the hospital for weeks. When he comes out, what am I supposed to do? Be like, up you go. He just fell out of there. He's not going to want to go up. And sure enough, when he gets out, he does not want to go up there. She's like, you got to get back on the horse. You got to. You gotta get up there. And he's like, I'm not ready. Weeks go by. He's not ready. She decides that she's got to take a more firm approach to getting him up those stairs. She breaks in to one of the old husband's mansions because she knows his son has an air rifle. She brings the air rifle back to her apartment or her house or flat. And she's like, listen. She's pointing it at him. You're going up those stairs. He's like, are you insane? And she's like, listen, I need you to go. In a few minutes, everything's going to be fine. But you need to go. He's like, that's not a real gun. She shoots it. She points it back at him. He's like, you're not going to shoot me. And she's like, not unless you make me. So he's freaking out. Her neighbor, because throughout all of these iterations, her best friend Toby and his wife have always lived next door. And Toby's always around. Do you want tea? He's always like, tea, let me make you tea. So in the midst of all this kerfuffle, he's bringing dinner over. She ends up accidentally shooting him in the knee. She's hurt herself. She's sprained her ankle running away from the other husband's house that she broke into. She's now lying on the floor in excruciating pain. She's hurt her toe. It's a whole thing. She's like, go up. Get your ass up in this attic. Eventually he goes, crying. He's very upset at this point. As you would be. And he disappears. So she goes outside. She's like, okay, I need to get out. Toby's gone because everything has reset. She's fine. Zac Efron's gone. She's outside. She's like, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to A, try one more time, or B, end it now? So she's plucking the petals off a feather one more time. She can do it one more time, and no matter what husband comes out, she's keeping him. Oh, I forgot to mention. So that ex-boyfriend that kept showing up as a husband, the second time, they end up separating. She's like, okay, I got to get him back in this house to get up in the attic. He doesn't want to. He's like, no, I don't want to come back to the house. It's painful. Like, we're going to fight. Let's meet at a cafe. She drugs him. She grinds up pills that she cannot identify because once again, she has broken in somewhere and stolen them. She's grinding him up in his coffee. They get back to the house. He's like, I don't feel good. She's like, I know. How about you hop up in the attic? He's like, I don't want to go in the attic. And she's like, up you go. So now she finally gets him up there. And it's so fun. It's so silly. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I think a lot of people will, especially if you just want to have some fun. It was 5 stars. Loved it. Anyway, the ending. So, she's going to do it one more time. Doesn't care what husband comes out. She's keeping him. So, she calls her sister. So, Zac Efron's up. The new husband's coming down. She runs out of the house. She calls her sister. What do you think of my husband? Sam? Oh, he's great. She asks her friend, what do you think of him? Great. She's like, okay, all right. So she texts him saying she's babysitting for her sister, but she isn't. One thing she did before she decided for sure, was she made all the calls, like made sure her sister was married, had kids, made sure everything was okay. She's like, it doesn't matter who this man is, because she's come to realize that, like, nothing's perfect, but especially when you're, like, instantly judging someone on everything you can think of as soon as you meet them, as she's doing with the husband. So she's like, I'm not going to find anybody if I'm being this critical. So she's out of the house. She calls him. Can you go to the store for me? He's like, you got it. So he leaves. She runs back to the house, goes up to the attic, sets it on fire. Before she does that, she grabs things of importance from around the house so that when she's done, she can run out. She calls the fire department. Then we get the final chapter from this new man's point of view. His name is Sam. And he's in the store getting what she needs, and he can hear, first he can smell the smoke. Then he can hear the fire trucks, and he's like, oh my God, Lauren, is she... No, it's okay. She was at her sister's house. She's calling her. She's not answering. He's freaking out. He gets back to the house, finds her, and like you just get the feeling that he loves her so much just from the way he was so concerned. And that's how it ends. The house is burnt to a crisp, so she cannot be tempted by the attic any longer. And she says to herself, we'll give it a try. If we don't work out, then we'll end it the regular way with copious amounts of paperwork. And I just thought it was great. So if you've gotten this far, leave me a let's see, leave me a flower emoji, a plant emoji. One thing in this book was she was obsessed with this giant plant for a long time, and in every lifetime after so long, she kept buying it every time. It's this huge ugly plant. So put a flower or a plant. And if you've read this, let me know what you thought. If you're going to read it, let me know that. Let me know how you're doing. Do you have any weekend plans? Tell me all about it. And I'll see you again really soon. Bye.